again, and good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we are taking a look at all of the ways that our minds come under attack from the mainstream media and all of the outcropping entities that make up our current social media environment, the landscape in which we live in the 21st century. Over the last series of videos, we've been discussing the concepts of materialism, nihilism, eugenics, and the role that think tanks play in the shaping of the ways in which the world operates. There are a lot of intertwining avenues of thought and discussion permeating through these, which paint a picture that's really quite helpful for understanding the state of the world today. What we wind up with when we consider how all of these components converge in a society is the recipe for a worldview. Now quickly, a worldview is a largely unconscious but generally coherent set of presuppositions and beliefs that every person has which shape how we make sense of the world and everything in it. This, in turn, influences such things as how we see ourselves as individuals, how we interpret our role in society, how we deal with societal issues, and what we regard as truth. We all have a worldview, whether we're aware of it or not. Within any worldview, there will be an underpinning philosophical stance regarding truth, value, and how we are meant to understand ourselves with respect to our purpose or our reason for being. This is highly important for any person to undertake and understand, because it's our worldview that informs us of how and why we do the things we do, think the things we think, and generally get along in our daily lives. It is my view that the convergence of the topics we've been discussing leads to a truly horrible state of things. And in turn, a worldview where inherent human value is forsaken and the deep, abiding truth of why we are here is abandoned for the sake of superficial, selfish, fleeting desires. These, ultimately, are driven by a type of emotional reactivity that is only exacerbated by narcissistic and fearful responses to the fundamental truths of reality that face us every day. In order to examine what I mean, I want to discuss an opinion piece that was published in the New York Times recently. This will be a little bit different from the previous article discussions that we've done before in this channel, as I'll be focusing more on the underpinning philosophical matters rather than the details of the writing. This should be an interesting investigation, so let's dive right in. The article is titled, "There Has Never Been a Better Time to Be Short." Now, I want to be clear that this is an opinion piece, and it's advertised as such on the publication's website. Therefore, we should not approach this in the sense of it being objective news. However, there is information being communicated here, which will serve our purposes this evening. The goal is to find out just what kind of information we're dealing with. For starters, there is an inherent amount of snark and tongue-in-cheek writing that's going on here, so we should take much of this with a grain of salt. However, there's enough going on within this piece to raise some serious concern regarding the worldview that's being furthered through this writing. The main thrust of the article is the author's assertion that being of shorter stature is becoming more preferable as the 21st century rolls onward, a sentiment that ostensibly throws off the old and outdated ideas that tall physical stature is something that should be desired and preferred among the human race. Right off the bat, we're met with a pretty rough idea that pits a certain subset of humans against another with respect to their perceived value within society. The early portions of the writing are focused on painting the narrative where society is so biased towards the vertically gifted that there have been many varied and extreme measures that have been undertaken to build up an industry where anyone seeking a few extra inches can readily access the means by which their growth can be achieved. Things such as surgeries and hormone treatments that are aimed at improving oneself, a eugenics concept if I've ever heard one, leading to a psychological programming where short people got no reason to live, as the song of the same title suggests. After some brief and scanty source discussion, data, and personal anecdotes, we read, "Now, I have young twins who are among the smallest in their kindergarten class, but instead of preparing to medicate them because of an antiquated societal bias, I'm going to let them be as they are, tiny, because shorter is better, and it is the future." The article here is chock full of assumptions, hasty generalizations, and a sense of self-satisfied entitlement or enlightenment that makes it difficult to take much of what is being said very seriously. Yet, what this shows is that the writer brings along a worldview where the human impact of their ideas is not truly considered, and they wind up promoting an ideology where an entire group of people is cast as a burden on society and therefore are undesirable. Their original argument that short-statured people have been deemed less good than tall is flipped on its head and given a steroid shot, ending in a kind of hypocritical mess where the inherent discrimination that's observed in society that's being described is simply redirected and placed on the material opposite of the group being championed. Worse yet, we find that the justification for this smear of those who cannot change what is deemed problematic by this writer is as large of an existential crisis as we have ever faced, that being climate change. The author writes, "The short are also inherent conservationists, which is more crucial than ever in this world of 8 billion. Thomas Samaras, who has been studying height for 40 years and is known in the small circles as the godfather of shrinkthink, a widely unknown philosophy that considers small superior, calculated that if we kept our proportions the same but were just 10% shorter in America alone, we would save 87 million tons of food per year, not to mention trillions of gallons of water, quadrillions of BTUs of energy, and millions of tons of trash. Short people don't just save resources, but as resources become scarcer because of the Earth's growing population and global warming, they may also be best suited for long-term survival, and not just because more of us will be able to jam into spaceships where we are forced off this planet we wrecked." Okay, so if we follow the logic to the conclusion that's presented, we're left with the assumption that humans, especially tall ones, are a net negative in the world, and as such, it's preferable for us to think of ways where we can reorient our ideals in order to maximize our material standing in the little time that we have left. This combination of materialism with positive eugenics is truly shocking, and at its root is a self-centered, narcissistic thought system which would make any dictator wave their fists to the clamoring mobs. To espouse an idea such as shrinkthink, where any group of people is deemed superior over another, is truly appalling and evil. This is the result of the kind of arrogant, narcissistic thinking that accompanies a materialist worldview. What needs to be seen and considered here is that when all is reduced to physical components that have no deep intrinsic value outside of their material usefulness, the door is wide open within a person's thinking to then adopt a moral framework where right and wrong is seen as relative based on personal desire rather than objective truth. This relativism is inherent to a materialist worldview, and it's used to justify all manner of evil in today's world. It's worth noting that the writer of this column chose to cite and then quote a man like Yuval Noah Harari. As a major figure in the World Economic Forum, Harari is an outspoken transhumanist, which is really just eugenics repackaged to give off a new appearance. Here are a few quotes from Harari which should illustrate his worldview. Quote, "Again, I think the biggest question in economics and politics of the coming decades will be what to do with all these useless people." Unquote. The problem is more boredom and what to do with them, and how will they find some sense of meaning in life when they are basically meaningless, worthless. What we are talking about now is like a second industrial revolution, but the product this time will not be textiles or machines, or vehicles or even weapons. The product this time will be humans themselves. You don't need children, you can have a pension fund. You don't need somebody to take care of you. You don't need neighbors and sisters or brothers to take care of you when you're sick. The state takes care of you. The states provide you with police, with education, with help, with everything. In terms of ideas, in terms of religions. The New York Times article is written within the same worldview and framework as the one which directed Dr. Harari to make the assertions that he has. What kinds of thinking does this highlight? What drives a person to view any group of humans as superior to another? And if this moral relativism and materialist worldview is driving a think tank with as much power and influence as the World Economic Forum, what does that say about the underlying philosophies that are likely present within the larger systems of power and governance throughout the world? How do our leaders really view and value us? Also, if a publication with the kind of reach of something like the New York Times is allowing this kind of thinking to be furthered through its pages, where will this lead, and when will the hammer drop on the next group of undesirable persons? We will look at all of this and more in upcoming videos, but until then, stay diligent, stay vigilant, check in on your loved ones, stay safe, and keep your minds on guard.